Welcome to Solstice Recovery Podcast. We are here at Solstice House, LA. Super stoked for today's guest. Today we have Jerry Heary. Jerry is a life coach. He specializes in addiction and recovery. Jerry, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man.
Dude, 100%. Stoked to have you here. So Jerry has been one of our group facilitators here, leading educational groups on recovery, on sobriety for our guys in the house, and been a great addition to the team, man. Yeah, stoked to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I know this year you made a transition in your life. You jumped from working in sales to now launching this new endeavor as a recovery coach and as a life coach. Tell me a little bit about, that decision and what went into that.
Wow. I think it had been, some time in the making. I was super unhappy in my sales job, lacking fulfillment, and I made a decision. I had a lot of people that were pushing me to make a decision, specifically to become a life coach. Like, I had people in my life that were telling me that I had been helping them. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I was literally just carrying the message, right? The things that I learned through my own 12-step work and my own recovery, I was able to relate that to other people's lives. And for some reason, people would reach out to me and ask for, help in situations or, come to talk. And they said that my feedback was helping them. And a lot of people were like, you should be a life coach. You should do this. My sister was one of those people. I had some coworkers and close friends. And ultimately, I wanted to work for myself. And I knew that being in sales wasn't what I was meant to do. And so I did some praying and some soul searching, really. And I discovered that what I'm meant to do is help people, right? And how can I do that was the next question. Like, how do I help people? And I think it was just clear, life coaching, specializing in addiction and recovery, because that's my background. That's what I know most. But all people, right? I want to help all people, not just those who are struggling, because life is hard. Right? A lot of people lack direction. A lot of people have goals, but they're always trying to meet their goals, right? In an inevitable state of constant trying.
Right.
And I see that in like everyone's lives.
Yeah. I like that. I like how you emphasize the word trying too. This need to pursue purpose or pursue something. If you're always pursuing purpose, then inherently you're coming from a place of lack, from absence of purpose. So what do you think is a tough question, but what do you think is a better alternative than this constant place of trying or constant place of pursuing?
Constant growth, right? In my own program, right? I discussed this with my sponsor, but for all people, right? You have to make growth the constant or else you're staying the same, right? Our bodies are constantly changing and our cells are renewing and regenerating, right? Our bodies are physically different every 7 years unless you're growing. I don't want to be 70 and have lived the same life over and over and over again for 70 years.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest fear. I was having a conversation with a buddy recently and we were talking about death, real light topic. And, obviously all of us are afraid of death, but for me, I think I came to this realization where I actually have a bigger fear than death. And that bigger fear is entrapment, things staying the same, stagnation, for two people who have experience with addiction, being stuck in this cycle of this circle, like a dog chasing its own tail, that is my hell, I'm way more fearful of that than even something like death. I think you were just speaking on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The fear entraps us, right? We entrap ourselves with our own beliefs and our own negative thinking. And that's kind of what led me to it, was this pursuit of happiness through positivity, right? Finding purpose through self-discovery, right? Because we all have it within ourselves, right? To find motivation and to grow. But a lot of people lack the knowledge or the direction that how do I get there? Right. And I think that's, if we're still on why I became, why I got into this role as a life coach, is to facilitate others' growth. I don't pick goals for somebody, right? I'm not going to walk into somebody's life and say, you're going to start a business and you're going to be a millionaire and you're going to get fit or you're going to lose weight. We already know that. We already know what we want and what we're not getting out of life. A lot of people have that. They don't know what the next right indicated action is. Right. And I think for me, like I have a strong foundation that's rooted in the 12 steps because it is a program of action that kind of gave me that foundation to develop a program to help others, no matter what your background is and where you want to go, because all it's about is action, taking action.
And so that feedback that you were getting from people in your life, and you were playing that role as like a mentor, as a leader, that was people outside of the world of recovery as well, because you'd been sponsoring guys, being of service to people in the program. And then suddenly you started getting this feedback from people just beyond the scope of just recovery, right? Am I correct in sort of that assumption?
Absolutely. And it's funny because when I first started, before I started, I didn't believe that I was able to help others unless it was in the aspect of recovery. I knew that I had something to offer because I was working the steps and I was shown the way, and that I could show others the way if they wanted what I had. But I didn't believe that I was able to do it for just anyone. And then that became evident in my life. And it was like I could no longer operate under this false belief because I had enough evidence to support that I did believe in myself. Yeah, I was afraid, but I believed in myself more. And I think that's what, like, that was that moment that I had where I knew that I was in the right place. I knew that I was doing the right thing because as fearful as I was, I knew that I believed in myself way more than the fear. And that's when it was time for me to make a decision, and I did. And the universe responded like that.
Yeah.
Once I made that decision, all these things started to open up for me. It was amazing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, that brings to mind like this little like mantra that I've heard, and that, you know, at a certain point, like your fear is pushing you a certain direction until your vision starts to pull you. And it I don't know, that came to mind as I heard you speaking on that a little bit.
Yeah, I like that.
It sounds like now like your vision is pulling you, right? Like the vision, that inspirational quality is bigger than the fear of I may not be capable of doing this. And we know in recovery, right? Like it's not about you and like whether or not you feel great about it, but you're getting this feedback. People are responding to you a certain way, and like that's all the evidence that you need.
Doing it despite, right? Like you have to do it despite how you feel about it or what you think about it. Because a lot of times what we think doesn't match up to the reality, right? And I think for me, it became this whole, you know, shifting the perspective, shifting the thinking into like this positive, like premature positivity, right? Like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to go into it with a positive attitude. I'm going to visualize the outcome in a positive way, and I'm just going to manifest through my actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about your experience in recovery a little bit. So how did you find yourself in the rooms of AA? How did the doors of recovery and, you know, this new life being rocketed into this fourth dimension, like how did that land on your doorstep?
I mean, there was a lot of God shots and a lot of people that helped me get there. Basically just 10 years in and out of treatment, never actually putting in any work, never doing it for myself. And it wasn't until I got an opportunity to move to LA. I found a home in Beverlywood in a year-long structured sober living. And I was finally desperate and willing to do it for myself and to do it someone else's way. And, you know, we were obviously exposed to, you know, we were given sponsors. We were given, you know, meetings to go to and ultimately working the steps. And it was the best experience of my life. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Way harder than my addiction.
So, I mean, obviously we're out of sober living right now, and you spent a year at a highly structured sober living. I'm curious as to your mindset when you were there, when you were at the sober living. Like, did you have like any whispers of insight of what that was going to do for you, or how that was going to set you up, or what did you want to be there? Did you not want to be there? I understand you needed to be there, but what was that experience like during that year?
Well, you're right. I did need to be there, and a part of me wanted to be there, but every day I struggled with actually wanting to do the work, right? Because it was a lot of work. Like I literally became a man at 30 in this sober living, right? And I didn't realize that like this is like things that normal people do, but like being accountable, right? Waking up, brushing your teeth, putting on decent clothing, making sure that your day is planned out accordingly, practicing time management skills, right? Balancing work with a program and then responsibilities in a home full of people with chores. You know, it got me set for life. Like it gave me all the life skills to become a positive man in a society, right? Not just a sober man, but like a productive adult. You know, like I struggled so heavily, but there was a certain point in that stay where I believed so much in what I was doing that I was going to do it no matter what. Like that became my new thing. It was like, this is just a small amount of time. You know, you look at it and you're like, a year? I don't think I can do it in a year. I don't think I can go that long, a full year, right?
Feels like a long time.
It seems like such a long time. But when you shift that perspective, there's so much power in that. Because I was like, how much time did I waste putting drugs in my arms?
So you like zoomed out a little bit. Yeah.
You have to. Because when you're in it, it becomes just like you're like a fish in a bowl. And you're like, oh my God, like this is my whole world and this is so much and I can't deal with it. But when you zoom out and you're like, oh, like I'm just here and I want to get here. I used to be here. And you can see like I'm moving along a little bit every time. I'm getting here. Like I will get there.
So what do you think it was that allowed you to like zoom out and have that perspective? Was it like, I don't know, the owners of the Sober Living, people around you, people in AA? Was that innate? Did you sort of have the hint of that perspective, or do you credit that to sort of the environment that you were in at the time?
I credit that to the environment. I think it was kind of, you know, a combination of all those things, right? Because, you know, I'm learning the steps, I'm working the steps, right? I'm learning new spiritual principles. And it's really like a coping skill now that I utilize in my life, of like having this zoom out, because I still get stuck in it, right? Like I'm in this new business endeavor and things are rough at first. I mean, you know how it is starting a new business and, you know, starting a new path in life. And it's like, whoa, I can't get everything done today that I want to do. And you feel like you have to get it all done today and this week. And you don't want to wait for the success that's going to happen in 6 months, a year and a half. But you have to zoom out and be like, okay, where am I at? Again, where am I at? Where was I, you know, a little bit ago? And where do I want to be at?
So that like the immediacy of the need to get there so fast or to put it all together, you know, within a certain time frame. It sounds like that immediacy like doesn't serve you in this manner that you're speaking on. Yeah.
I've learned to like embrace the uncomfortability, you know? Because I know that growth and being uncomfortable exist in the same plane, right?
Could you explore that a little bit with me?
Well, I mean, I think about it like this, right? Like alcoholism and addiction are diseases of comfort, right? Like we're constantly seeking comfort. We're constantly wrapping that warm blanket around ourselves, right?
Got our binky.
Everyone in this world has to get uncomfortable if they want to grow. That's the bottom line. You have to be uncomfortable if you want to grow. That's it. So like, if I'm going to make the new constant growth, which I talked about earlier, then I can't look at these stages of uncomfortability, these days where I don't feel like everything's going my way, as negative. I have to embrace it. I have to say, okay, this is part of the process because this is where growth happens, right?
So it sounds like the way that you feel, your internal state, is no longer your barometer for where you're at in life.
Not at all. Right? It's like, I feel this way, but I know that it's not my reality because my mind is just playing. It's like the old tricks, right?
Little trickster.
It's the old, it's the old alcoholic
Hermes
thing.
Is working.
Right. It's the ego, really, that's saying like, why aren't you doing everything that you should be doing today that's only supposed to happen in the next 6 months, right? So why would I sit here and say, all right, yeah, that's realistic. I should be doing everything that I should do in the next 6 months in 1 day or 1 week. That doesn't serve me, right? That's not someone who is responsible. That's not someone who is a careful planner, right? Starting a business takes, you know, intricate planning. You're only as good as your plans.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's why I asked you about the immediacy, because I'm so curious on it. You know, I've been working with addicts as a therapist and, you know, as a sponsor and as an owner of Sober Living for so long. And it's something that I see every single time, is that somebody gets sober and they immediately want to put all the externals of their life back together in the first week, in the first day. And it does not serve them. And to be honest, I think it's kind of the same mechanism that's at work that is like similar to the mechanism underneath the addiction. It's like I try to communicate to these guys that like, no, it's what you just spoke on. It's learning how to manage relationships in the house. It's learning how to be accountable, cleaning up after yourself, doing your dishes, doing your chore, being a part of the community, showing up to the team dinners. It's that type of shit that shifts that internal mind, the perspective that you're talking about, that puts you in a position to then attack and put together the external pieces of your life. You don't need to put it all together on day one or day two. And in fact, it can be so self-defeating.
100%. I mean, that's one of the greatest lessons I learned actually in that sober living. See, the way that they have it set up, like you don't have a phone until you earned your phone back. Like you have to actually work your fourth and fifth step, apply for a new status in the house, and then take some type of accountability toward it, which is typically writing a really long essay, right? Like 60,000 words. And then you're able to like get your phone back.
That's a long essay.
And there's restrictions on it too, you know? But as you go in, like these are all the things that you give up, and then you can't wait to get them back, not realizing that like, I didn't even miss my phone. I didn't even miss it. And then when I got it back in my hand, it was like,
the value is different. It no longer had as much value.
No, but I went right back to it, right? I went right back to it. And the lesson really that I learned in all of this was that it's an inside job. Everything in life is an inside job. I was just talking to a guy in the sauna today who's struggling with, you know, he's reading these self-help books, went through a breakup, you know, he's one of my buddies, and we're checking in. And I looked at him and I was like, it's an inside job, man. You're not going to be happy until you're all right with yourself. And I think that's what, you know, you're alluding to it about, you know, the accountability and doing chores and responsibilities is that you got to learn about who you are as a person and develop those skills, right? And get all right with that, because anybody that comes into a sober living ain't all right with who they are inside. I don't know about you, but when I got sober, I didn't necessarily like or love myself. It took me a long time to love myself. So when I say it's an inside job, I mean, like it does not come from any type of externals, whether it's your phone or the girls or money, the, you know, what they say in the program, the money, property, and prestige. Like, yeah, that's a great pitfall for anybody in life, regardless if you're in a 12-step program or not. It's an inside job. You know, everything that you want, right, to manifest in your life, it comes from within.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about just your experience with the steps, or like what in the steps do you think provided the most value for you? Or even in your opinion, like what do you think kind of the point or the goal of the step work is?
I would say self-discovery, right? Growth through self-discovery. And, you know, in my experience, it was, my biggest things were 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. 4 and 5, like I literally held on to things that I told myself for years that I would take to the grave.
Will you just explain what step 4 and 5 is a little bit?
Step 4 and 5, where you make an inventory. It's for anyone who isn't familiar. It's, you know, writing down all of your resentments, you know, all of the things that you're constantly thinking of, people you've harmed, situations in your life that you haven't let go of, and finally getting them out. You put them on paper. You tell someone else. You confess it before God. There's so much power in writing out all of these situations. And then once you write them out, you see, because it's not about the person, right? Like I had a resentment with so-and-so. It's not about the resentment with so-and-so. It's what I brought to the table, right? It's by taking up accountability for what I brought to the situation, what defects I brought into it, right? Because that's why I still feel the way that I do, right? That's why I'm still holding on to it. Is because I'm still exhibiting. Nobody ever sat me down and was like, yes, you're being selfish. That was manipulative of you. You were lying. Nobody ever said those things to me. But when I had time to actually write it out and to look at it, I'm staring at it on a piece of paper, and I have to wholeheartedly and honestly tell another human being in front of God.
Yeah, I think, and I want to get to 6 and 7 a little bit to speak on that 4 and 5. You know, I think that for so many of us that when we come into recovery or we come into a program, like we feel like a victim. I feel like a victim to my circumstance. I feel like a victim to my drug and alcohol abuse. And in that process of 4 and 5, I'm able to see so clearly how I've been an active participant in my own victimhood. right? And how, in fact, I'm not a victim. I'm an active participant. And there's such a shift that happens there that removes this lens of victimization. And the result of that is this real sense of empowerment. But the ironic thing is, the paradox is that empowerment comes from looking at the shadow, looking at the dark spots, looking at the blind spots, right? And so as a result of having the humility of being willing to like look yourself in the mirror and truly understand where you fall short, what comes from that humility is real confidence as a result of that, because not a lot of people are willing to look at themselves in that same capacity.
Well, what will you have on me? If I take accountability and own my defects and my shortcomings, no one else has anything to say, right? It's like if a comedian got up on stage and he made fun of himself, nobody could really go in on him. You know what I mean?
It's like
you put everything out there on
like
Front
8
Street.
Mile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you know?
Right? Or like a rap battle, right? It's like I'll go in and make fun of myself, and then you will literally have nothing to say against me because I've already owned these things about myself. But that's where the growth happens. That's how you get free from the resentment, is by owning and taking accountability for your actions. And then it's like you have no choice, right? Because once you become aware of it, once I'm aware of these defects, am I still exhibiting them? Am I still acting in the same way, right? You have no choice but to say, oh, I didn't know, because you already are aware of it.
I want to pull something up here, see if I can find it. Is my favorite definition of resentment. I don't want to take your time and look it up right now, but it's beautiful. I'll send it to you later. It's fucking incredible. From Brene Brown. It's fucking incredible.
There you go.
Wow, dude. Lots of power in your words today. Okay, so we talked a little bit about 4 and 5, being willing to look at yourself, the admission of that, taking ownership of these wounds, of your shortcomings, of your character defects, and how that fed into a sense of empowerment. How does that fold into then this like 6 and 7? And if you could, again, for our listeners, tell people sort of what 6 and 7 is, and just, I think it's so beautiful, the layout of the steps in the process and how they all fold into one another. So I just want to hear about, how you think about that.
Well, yeah, because it's like through our 4th and 5th step work, we cultivate a list of defects, right, that we exhibit. Our most common defects, right? Our go-to. I like to call them defense mechanisms, right? Like lying was a defense mechanism for me. Manipulation was a defense mechanism for me. Being selfish was a defense mechanism for me.
Defending from what?
From the ego, right? Defending from, ultimately, I didn't want anyone to know who I really was.
Fear.
Right? Of course. Absolutely. And now that we have those lists of defects, it's like, all right, well, now it's time to work on them. And how do we work on them? Well, we know what the opposite of these defects are. Like the opposite of selfishness is selflessness or altruism, right? So when I have these selfish thinking, when I want to act in a selfish way, how do I remove it? Well, I ask God for help and I take the contrary action. It can be that simple. It's not that simple. With practice, it becomes that simple, but it's not.
And so what is the contrary action? I know that's a word that you hear a lot in the rooms of AA, but again, some of these folks maybe, interested in sobriety or recovery or AA, and they're not really familiar with the specific nomenclature.
Of course. So a contrary action is literally taking the opposite action, right? So it's like, if you were going to take a selfish action, you take an equal and opposite action in the steps of selflessness, right? You be of service to someone.
Right. So it's like, instead of wanting to pick up a drink, I'm going to bring my feet into an AA meeting.
Bring your feet. I love that you said that, because that's what the steps give us, right? Smart feet.
Yeah.
Because we talked about how the head can still go. But when you have a program and a foundation that's rooted in action, whether it's 12 steps or not, no matter what your head's telling you, right? Like someone who's overweight and they're struggling with going to the gym, but they go every single day, and they wake up and they're like, I'm not losing as much weight as I thought I would. I'm not losing it as fast as I would. But they still get up and they go to the gym anyway. It's because they have smart feet, right? You built that foundation based on action, right? You had the consistency, because consistency is the key to transformation, no matter who you are. Whether you're in addiction, in recovery, if you're just a person on the street, not on the street, but, in the world.
Yep. You got to show up to the meditation pillow every day. It's a practice.
Everything
It's a devotional, consistent practice.
Everything's about routine. Even people without routine don't realize it. They just have unhealthy routines.
Yeah.
Right? Like life is a routine. Though we run on a 24-hour schedule. The sun rises, the sun sets, the same. It's like we have a routine, and that's ingrained in us since we're babies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's on us to like notice the routine, the pattern, whatever you want to call it, and to change it.
Yeah.
You got to tweak your routines.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been one of my greatest successes as of late. That's how I got into this industry. I was my first client.
I fucking love that, dude.
I was my first client.
Yeah.
I tell everyone that.
Yeah, it brings to mind just this archetype that is found in a lot of different mythology and a lot of like really like Carl Jung, really famous psychologist, right? So the archetype is as a wounded healer. This understanding that somebody has a wound, they heal their own wound, and then from that place, from that experience, are able to pass that on to others. And it's like this chain sort of reaction, right? And that's what we see in AA. So it sounds like that this is the exact experience that you had.
I mean, that's literally why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, I believe that that's what makes me powerful. That's what makes you powerful. So what makes anyone powerful is their own experience. But where the power comes from is how you choose to relate it and how you choose to help others through your experience. Are you going to take your experience and then just go, F off into oblivion and sit around and be like, well, my life changed and I'm the better?
Yep. I love that you use that word relate, because I think that word is at the heart of healing and in so many ways, right? And so like our stories are our stories. Like I can't argue your experience. I can't argue my experience, right? Your story stayed the exact same, but the way you related to your story shifted, right? And so speak on a little bit just this idea of relatedness and how that relates to maybe your higher power or other people in recovery, and just the idea that like it's about relationship, which is dynamic. It's not static. It's ever moving, It's also the difference between process and result, enjoyment versus pleasure. It's all in this dynamic process of relationship as opposed to something static like knowing, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think that, what you alluded to earlier kind of speaks to this, because our experience, is everything, right? So how we relate to it, how does that change? That changes a lot. Like when I first got sober, my story was very much like you talked about, victimhood, right? These things had been done to me, what my parents had done to me, what some sicko when I was a kid done to me, right? The traumatic events that had happened to me, right? Not what I chose to do with it afterward, not how I chose to act, when I was in it. Now that I have a relationship with the higher power and I've done this work, I can truly relate to my story in a way that's beneficial to me. I can see things that that did not break me, but made me stronger. Things that I am now able to use as a story to relate to someone else so that they may grow, so that they may see their story in a different way. See, it's that change in perception. The change in perception was how we tweak the narrative of the story. Because that's all it is, right? Like we're just telling the narrative in a different way. The story, like you said, stays the same.
Yeah.
We are relating to the narrative differently. And so we're telling the story differently, right? The narrative just changes.
Absolutely. And that's, I think that's one of the ways that we heal trauma, right? Is we shift the relationship to how we responded to what happened to us. And as a result of that, the way we respond to it is so different.
Well, yeah, I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. Have you ever seen somebody who operates under that victimhood? They will continue to be victimized over and over and over again because they believe themselves to be the victim.
Mm-hmm. And some of them may not even know that they're operating from that paradigm.
Not at all. And that's the crutch. That's the main thing. That's a driving point that gets me out of bed to want to help people, right? Is that people are operating under these false beliefs continually, every day, continually victimizing themselves, right? What he did to me, what she said to me, how my boss makes me feel. This job makes me, stressed out. I can't lose weight. these unhealthy, body images in the world today. What someone said to me on social media. If you're all right with yourself and you know that you're a strong survivor, these things don't matter. It doesn't matter. You're Teflon. It rolls off your back. But that's one of the hardest things to do that I've come to find out.
So, in speaking on this idea of empowerment, I think that there's a paradox that is present, specifically in regards to addictive behaviors, because this sense of empowerment, of like going out and making your mark on the world, and as opposed to letting life happening to you, your quote, sort of happening to life, that sense of inner empowerment only goes so far, because as somebody who is in recovery, right, like there are limitations to our own thinking. There are limitations to our own sense of empowerment. And that's why the steps have turned us on to a bigger force or something,
right,
beyond our own inner sense of empowerment that we can then plug into.
Jeez. What was that?
That was the map.
Am I driving somewhere right now?
Right. So if you could just a little bit speak on this paradox of empowerment, of how empowerment only takes you so far, and perhaps the limitations of that as well.
Well, it's funny the way you brought that up. Like, the world's no longer happening to me. I'm happening to the world. When I'm in the gym, I hate doing cardio, but I'll do like these active rest days. And I get about 10 minutes in and my legs are burning and my head's telling me that I just need to go rest in the sauna, that I worked out enough all week. And I start looking around and I go, they're not in here with me, or I'm not in here with them. They're all in here with me. They got to work out at my speed. And I start cycling harder. I go, I got this. I'm like listening to DMX and I'm like making noise, right? I hype myself up because at the end of the day, it is just me, right? It's just me happening to the gym. And what do I know? 10 people walk by that wave to me and say, what's up, right? Because I've made an impact everywhere I go, right? But this connection that you're talking about that most people don't know exists, a lot of people get turned off because they're like, it's God, it's this or it's that. It's the universe. It's energy. I'm creating energy. I'm putting energy out to receive it.
Yep.
Right? And that's what I think everything's about. It's this constant flow, right? There is no beginning. There is no end. It's a constant flow, and I have to exert it to receive it, right? I will get back what I put out. Most people don't understand that you're operating under universal principles, spiritual principles, when you're doing that. When you're putting out good energy, you're getting good energy back. A lot of people don't understand that they're putting out negative energy and they're getting negative energy back. Why am I manifesting all these shitty things in my life? Why is so-and-so manifesting all these great and positive things in their life? It's about the energy. So if you're talking about something greater than us, I speak to energy. Yes, I have a higher power, but the flow of energy is the greatest thing that I have ever felt. The energy that I feel right now when I speak about these things, it makes me sweat.
And it's not just because it's hot in here.
No, I don't even feel the temperature. It's actually quite cool. But I'm fired up because I feel that, I feel this so deep in my bones. And that's the experience, right? That is the experience of the universe. It is literally flowing through me right now. It's electric. I can feel it in my fingertips because I know that what I'm putting out, I'm receiving right back. And it feels great. It
feels phenomenal. That's the best feeling in the world. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, I'm so curious on this idea of empowerment, self-assuredness, and where that ends, right? And where relying on community, other people, a higher power, etc., begins. Because this sense of empowerment, and there are a lot of people who are truly victimized in this world, right? And victimized by systems that are at play, and these things do exist, and so I think it's important to bring the education or the awareness on this inner game, right? So people can understand that they can escape from that lens, etc. But speak a little bit on some of the things outside of you that have helped put you back together, right? Community in AA, brotherhood, higher power, etc. It's this wonderful life that you're living. Like, where does your responsibility of that end and something else begin?
Right. That's a good point. I just want to say that strong people ask for help. I didn't believe that when I first got sober. I thought that men, we internalize everything. We throw it deep down in this chest. We throw a lock on it. We don't let anyone know how we're feeling or how it's affecting us. Right. But what I really learned was that real men and strong people ask for help. Right. So the things that have kept me, where I'm at, and the things that keep me going, right, is community. Like you talked about, a group of men specifically. There's women, that are involved in my community as well. But for me, it's about strong relationships with other males. I have, like my closed fist. I have a group of men that I am so close with that know everything about me, know my deepest, darkest secrets. They know what I'm going through on a weekly basis. We all check in, right? We stay close. We have group chats. And then outside of that, there's like another group, in the community, right? And these are all people that I stay familiar with, right? And that I tell, and I'm a firm believer in telling the people in your life that you love them constantly. I believe that leads to so much happiness.
We were just speaking on that a little bit. So your sister's here. She's in the studio with us. She's in the room. Why don't you share a little bit about that, what we talked about earlier, about telling people how you feel about them?
I believe in that so much. Like I said, I believe that your happiness is directly related to the amount of people that you tell that you love. I tell my friends often that I love them. We end phone calls. Like my wife, when we first got together and she was around like me and my friends, we were like, all right, man, I love you. All right, I love you. See you later. I love you. We're on the phone. All right, bud, I love you. I'll talk to you later. And she's like, who was that? I was like, oh, my buddy Joey. That was my friend Pat.
Yeah.
And my boy John. Right? We have great relationships. And I have great relationships with every person that I tell I love. And even the people that I'm not super close to, when I see them, right, when we're like back at the old sober living, showing up for groups for the new guys that are in the house, and we're always saying, I love you. Hey, man, I haven't seen you in a while. We're leaving. Hey, I love you. That love comes from like the camaraderie and the recognition and the relatedness to their struggle, what we had been through. I know that you have been where I've been and you did the work that I did to get out of it. And I love you for that. There's so much power. It's like what I'm talking about with the universe. It's like putting out what you're receiving, right?
Yeah.
How can I receive love if I'm not putting love out? How can I receive love if I don't believe that I am worthy of love?
Yeah.
There's so much power in that.
And it's in that shared wound that you're talking about, right? Because when you know suffering in your own pain, right, then you're able to access empathy and relate to others suffering in pain. And as a result of that, you get plugged into this inspirational quality of wanting to provide love, solution, and good for others.
Sometimes empathy just grips me up. I'll cry watching a random show. Because I'm like, and my wife's like, are you tearing up right now? And I'm like, how can you not feel? How can you not feel what this man, like he just lost his daughter? How can you not understand what that must feel and what he could be going through? Just the pursuit in my mind and my heart of that type of pain brings me to tears. Watching someone else struggle because I've struggled for so long and understanding that on a deep emotional level brings me to tears.
Yep. And it's this idea that like our wounds and our gifts are so connected. And that's why it's so hard for people to own the gift, because in order to own the gift, you also have to own the wound. And people don't want to own their wounding. It's too scary. But we see here the evidence of a man who has owned his wound. And as a result of that, he's been plugged onto his gifts. And now he's taking that gift and sharing it with his community, with his people, with those that he loves. And that is the most beautiful thing on the planet.
Thank you. First off, thank you for that. I mean, that's a beautiful way to put it. But I mean, it's kind of like that simple saying, like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But like to add to that, it's like, yeah, just because it doesn't kill you doesn't necessarily make you stronger. It's how you relate to it and how you choose to use it to help others. That's what makes us stronger. Taking that wound, utilizing it, right? Like defects that we were talking about earlier. If you hone your defects correctly, they're actually character assets. not character defects, right? These defense mechanisms I learned to like hone them for the good.
Yeah, like they're not bad. They actually served a purpose in your life.
Absolutely.
They kept you alive. They kept, they kept you protected and in safety for very long. They just didn't serve you in the bigger scope. But it's not this lens of good or bad. It's just the function of how it was serving you. So we're sort of getting close to wrapping up on time here. If there was a man who was struggling with addiction, struggling with alcoholism, considering maybe, going to a sober living, considering reaching out for help, considering something like a 12-step program, what would you say to him?
It's not going to happen next week. If your mind's telling you you'll do it next week, you'll do it tomorrow, it's not going to happen. You have to make the decision and do it, right? Like, you need it, you want it, cool, but it won't happen unless you do it. I know how you feel. I've been there, but there is so much strength. There's so much strength in saying, I need help. I had to learn that as a man, and it makes me emotional because everything that I thought that I knew to be true of what a man was wrong. That real men are able to get vulnerable. Real men are able to say that I am not okay, but I am willing to get there. That's where we all need to be. I had to learn that at 30 years old. It is like tomorrow, next week is too late. Because for a lot of people, it doesn't happen.
Yep.
It does not. I've lost so many people because they thought they could one more time. I still have time. It's not the right time. Time. Interesting factor.
Wow. Is there any, I don't know if you're active on socials or anything like that. Is there any place where people can like follow you? Are you putting out any content, anything like that?
Absolutely.
Like if people wanted to learn more about your work or what you do, if you want to do a little plug for that.
Yeah, I just started a business page for my company, Motivating Wellness. You can find me at motivating.wellness. That's my page. Put out posts. I'm going to have some reels coming soon. I just started a new endeavor for personal training and nutritional coaching. So that's going to be my 3-pronged approach to add to my life coaching as well. Just be an overall wellness coach and, try to get people pumped up. What I realized was a lot of people get sober and then what? I've seen a lot of people get sober and get overweight, get unhealthy, sit in basements, become agoraphobic, get locked into these dead end jobs. And that was me as well. And like I said, I became my first client and I'm willing to help anyone. And right now, that's where I'm at.
Wow, Jerry, thank you so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it. Again, I want to echo what Jerry was saying. If there's anybody out there that's struggling that needs support, feel free to reach out. Again, we're here at Solstice House, LA, Solstice Recovery. It's a men's sober living. We got 13 men in this house who are beginning this path that Jerry just described. And again, like the evidence of this process, the evidence of this work right here, like you have living proof right here. This man's on fucking fire. And so I encourage you once again, as Jerry said, it takes courage to reach out and ask for help. It's a strength, not a weakness. And it doesn't happen by too much. There's no magical thinking. It doesn't show up on your doorstep tomorrow. So we got to train those feet and take some contrary action.
Absolutely.
So on that note, that's it, brother. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
my
man.
guy.
Appreciate
Fucking
you.
Sick, dude.